let's jump into pro football talk. Can Mahomes pull off the three-peat, or will Lamar or Allen take him down? They got to go through each other first. One's got to go through the other. Here to talk about these gargantuan stakes. He's our pal from Sports Illustrated and also the host of the Verderame Show. It's Matt Verderame. What's the poop, fella? How you been? Happy New Year to you.
I'm good. I'm good, Shek. How you doing?
Not as well as you are. Not just because I'm a Steelers fan and because you're a Chiefs fan, but you are on your way to Arrowhead this
Yeah.
weekend. Would you rather let's hook you up to the lie detector? You're a Chiefs guy, but would
Yeah.
you rather be there to watch Lamar v. Allen?
Um, I'd rather be at Arrowhead only because I just have so many relationships in Kansas City. I just
Hmm,
love going out there and seeing everybody, and I love barbecue.
sure.
So, in that regard, now the game, I think is going to be a much better game. I think Baltimore and Buffalo is going to be a great game. I think it's probably the game of the year. Um, and maybe that's eclipsed in a week if the Chiefs beat Houston and they play whoever wins this game. But no, I think, look, Buffalo, I've been to games in Buffalo. Buffalo's an incredible atmosphere. I think it's the better game of the two for sure. I mean, right now, geez, the Ravens are favored on the road in that game. So I mean, the Bills can even kind of rightfully play this, nobody believes in this card. Whereas with Kansas City, I mean, look, let's be honest. I mean, if they lose that game, it's a calamity. With all due respect to Houston, they should win that game. So, um, yeah, the game is certainly better in Buffalo, but I'll see about 50 different people I know in Kansas City, so it'll be fine.
For sure. I mean, it is a fascinating conversation that I really don't want to dip into. I mean, I want to, but it would be a half an hour. And I want to talk about what you think is going to happen in the games. But man, KC burnt ends versus Buffalo wings. That's on the short list of greatest
That's a
football town signature food stuff. I don't know which I would go with. I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole because, like I say, it'll consume the conversation. So, instead, and I'd really like to consume some burnt ends and some wings, to be honest. All right. Um, let's look at it first from the Chiefs' perspective, and I am not assuming victory. At least another big number at home for the Chiefs. They never cover or almost never cover, no matter who's rolling through town. So I don't know why this one would be any different. We did see recently these two teams hook up. Obviously, the Chiefs took care of business there. I suspect that the same happens once again. By hook or by crook, they will survive this game. Let's assume that they do. No offense to the Texans. Um, who, again, Travis Kelce a couple days ago said, "We're not afraid of anybody." That's not really the issue, Travis. I mean, I do think there is Andy Reid probably in his heart of hearts probably doesn't want Joe Burrow coming to town. I don't think that's probably the guy. Who do you think deep down does Andy Reid, does Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the rest of them not want to see coming into Arrowhead for the title game?
Okay, so this is a complicated answer, but I think it's the truth. So first of all, this game, by the way, against Houston, I'm with you. Like you can't just assume they're going to win. I mean, they should win, but you can't assume it. I went back and looked. In the history of the divisional round, there have been 83 games where a team is favored by more than 7 points. Those teams that are favored are 65 and 18, straight up.
Straight
So
up.
65 and 18. Against the spread, they're 41, 41, and 1.
Oof.
So, I mean, it's a coin flip whether they cover, but they're about an 80% shot to win
I guess the
historically.
bookmakers know what they're doing is the answer to that one, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Uh,
41 and 41. Sheesh.
yeah, right down the line. Um, Now look, I would say that I think if you ask those guys if they win this game, who are they going to be rooting for on Sunday? They match up better with Baltimore. They have beaten Baltimore every time they've played them in the Lamar Jackson era, except for one time, and that's because they fumbled the ball really late when they were setting up for a game-winning field goal. I mean, they just beat them every single time they see them. But I think the players would tell you they'd rather play Buffalo because they want to get back at them for losing that game. I remember
Hmm.
watching the quarterback series on Netflix, and the Chiefs had won their divisional game, and they were waiting to watch the Bills-Bengals playoff game a couple of years ago. And Mahomes' father asked him, who are you rooting for? And he said, well, we match up better with the Bills, but I want to beat the Bengals. And I think that's kind of their mentality. Like, I think not I don't want to say the easier game, but the better schematic matchup for them is the Ravens. They'll play man. They'll jam up the line of scrimmage. They're willing to do that. Buffalo, it's a little bit tougher, but I think they would tell you we want to get back at the only team that beat us in a real game this year. So I think they'd rather play Buffalo. I think they're better off playing Baltimore.
I'm a competitive person, but that's another level that, these uber competitive human beings
Yeah.
imbued with the confidence of their superhuman physical attributes. They're just wired differently, and I'm struck by it. 2 decades into talking about professional athletes, it is wild that that's where their head goes. To me, it's like, who will we have an easier chance of beating?
Right.
That's who I want. Who's going to lay down more quickly for us, not who has hurt my feelings in the past. Um, I think we've had this conversation. I think QB wins are a thing. I think as long as the postseason tournament exists and they end it with giving a trophy to just one team, and in the QB league where the price of getting into the playoffs is having one of those high end QBs.
Right.
Witness what happened to the one team that got in there that didn't have one of those guys, the Pittsburgh Steelers. You see where they are now. You have to have one of those. Not only are QB wins a statistic, they're more important than they've ever been in man's recorded history. And here we are now. And we know by definition that Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson is going to go another season without getting to a Super Bowl. I look
Yep.
at it sort of for what's on the horizon, as in autumn of 2025. Both teams should be in decent shape in terms of free agency. Now that the Chiefs are the ones that are kind of up against it with Kelsey and Chris Jones more than the Ravens or Bills are. But is there a team between the two in Buffalo and Baltimore that you feel like they better cash in now because tomorrow is real murky?
I don't know that I feel like one more than the other in that regard has to win, but I feel like there's more pressure on the Bills in this game.
Why
And that's
so?
because the Bills are at home, and if they lose this game, they've lost three divisional round games in a row at home to three different AFC contenders: Cincinnati, Kansas City, and Baltimore. I don't think there's any shame in losing at Kansas City next weekend. Not that I'm saying they will, but if they do, whoever wins, if they go to Kansas City and they lose that game, it's like when Manning would lose to New England, right? Like it's hard to really sit there and be like, "How did you lose that game up in Foxborough to Brady?" Like because he's Brady. I mean, that's why. I don't know that anybody's ever going to hold that against Peyton Manning 30 years from now that he lost in Foxborough, New England in a playoff game. I think if
Oh,
you
but the other side of that coin is in the hierarchy for what it matters, and it does matter to those cats, no matter what they say when there's a microphone in front of them. They do care how they're regarded, not
no,
versus Jake Delhomme. They care about how
correct,
they are considered among that very
correct.
small group of peers. And the fact is, Brady got over Peyton, and there is nothing you can do about that
No,
now.
and I think that's
You
that's
know,
true, but I guess maybe right or wrong because it's early in their careers to a degree. I guess I just look at it like none of them are eclipsing Mahomes. They're just not. Like none of those guys are winning three Super Bowls and all these MVP. I mean, they're just Mahomes has pretty much stamped himself as the quarterback who's taking the torch from Brady. Like I just don't know that there's really going to be any world. I mean, look, history as well as I. How many guys win three Super Bowls in their careers? I mean, you
they're
can count them on like one hand. So
literally true.
yeah, so I think for Allen and Lamar, look, they're great players. Lamar's probably going to win his third MVP, but I think at this point you're kind of fighting for silver, and if you lose this game, if you're Josh Allen, you lose this game. It's like you're not. Not only are you not Mahomes, you're not even Burrow or Lamar. Like you can't even. I mean, Burrow's been to a Super Bowl. Lamar's won now. If he does win it, three MVPs. If you're Josh Allen, what do you have? You've won two second team All Pro nomination. Like who cares? I mean, you got to win. Otherwise you're Warren Moon, who is an incredible quarterback. But you look back and nobody talks about Warren Moon historically. They should, but nobody does. And so I think both guys, there's a ton on the line. If Jackson loses this game, doesn't play well, it's going to be the same old story. Well, he choked in January. He wasn't good enough to win that game. I don't think there's going to be this massive penalty if they lose at Arrowhead. But if they lose, whoever loses this game, there's going to be that talk of, yeah, great season again, but who cares? And that's that they're going to have to live with that another 12 months until they're back in the spot.
I agree with you almost entirely, except that whoever survives this one and goes to Arrowhead, and whether it's fair or not, if you lose that, it's going to be another season gone without a Super Bowl appearance. And there will be some tough sort of career questions to be asked. I mean, both of these guys are tracking towards Merino Island right now, and it's a little bit later than I think we all want to acknowledge. And as far as X factors that are that aside in the QB league from the two central figures here, in Lamar and Josh Allen, who do you consider to be the X factors? I guess beyond just this game remaining on the AFC side of the thing. And I'll just start it off with Sean McDermott. I have long contended when I mentioned Dan Marino that he was he was poorly served by the legend Don Shula. He, bad draft after bad draft after
Right.
bad
Right.
draft doomed Marino's career more than anything that number 13 did individually out on the
I agree.
gridiron. I think Sean McDermott is to some degree. Now, Joe Brady has offset that, and that's significant. But I still think that the defensive mindset is a little outmoded in today's game, and that has hurt the Bills' chances previously. Obviously, we've seen it happen. How
Yep.
say you? Who are the X factors, McDermott or otherwise, that could impact the way these playoffs go?
Well, I guess to your point, and I agree with you, not to be boring, but I think it's the Bills love to sit in their nickel defense more than any team in the NFL. They do not want to come out of it. They believe Teron Johnson can basically be a linebacker in the box as a corner, as a nickel corner. And I'm here to tell everybody right now that if they do that against Baltimore, this is going to be the last game they play this year.
Hmm.
Because if they want to play Teron Johnson as a force linebacker in this game, the Ravens are going to go into two tight end personnel, and they're going to put Patrick Ricard, who's a 300-pound fullback, out there, and they are just going to blow them off the ball over and over and over. And we saw it earlier this year when they played. Henry ran for 199 yards on 24 carries. They ran them over whenever they needed to. The Bills are a small front. They are a team that does not like to play big personnel. They're not a team that's necessarily equipped to do it. And, Baltimore got crushed last year for the way they played that AFC title game. They stopped running the ball. They got away from the way they played that game. I do not think that's going to happen again. If they go down, they're going to go down running the football and playing their style of football. And if they lose, fine, but that's how they're going to do it. Does McDermott come out of that style of football and play a little bit bigger, or do they just sit in that front? Because if they sit in that front, I think they're giving up 250 rushing yards. Like, I just do not think they can match up physically with them. And I guess, looking at the other game, the AFC side before we go to the NFC, in the AFC, I think the other thing is who the hell's playing left tackle for Kansas City?
Hmm.
Because if Houston's going to win this game, to me, it's going to be forcing turnovers, making the Chiefs make mistakes. Like if Kansas City doesn't play that well, but they don't turn the ball over, they're probably going to win. They're probably just going to do enough to win the game. They're very good defensively. Mahomes will make his half dozen plays, and that'll be enough. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, they've got to wreck the game. They've got to have one of those days where like they combine for 5 sacks and 2 strip sacks and
Hmm.
force an interception. Like if it's not that, I just don't think Houston's got enough in the tank to beat them. Maybe they cover the number, but I don't think they can beat them. They're going to have a huge day off the edge to win that game.
This is untethered from any specific reference, but it's funny to me that the games in history that you sort of assume who's going to survive that one and start talking about the next round, those are the ones that end up you look back on and say, how did that the Chiefs are in that spot where people are giving them a pass into the title game. Be careful there. To your point, if you're a Chiefs fan, don't assume victory there. More importantly, Patrick Mahomes, don't you assume victory? I think probably is more
Yeah,
relevant. Also, Justin Tucker had nothing to do with the wild card game.
it's true.
I am interested to see what he does. If he comes through in a big spot, that would be fascinating to see him
He
have to run out there in a critical moment and see
he
if
had
he can
his worst
swing that leg.
he had his worst playoff game ever in Buffalo in
Yeah.
2020. Missed two. Now it was windy as hell that night, but he missed two field goals, and that was a big part of the reason they lost that game. So I'm with you. Look, you have two games this weekend that everybody thinks one team's going to win, right? Everybody thinks the Chiefs and the Lions are just going to basically roll through these teams. You're right. I mean, those are the games. I think it's like to your point. It's about, are the players going to be focused? Are the players going to be, because that's, you start looking ahead
That's
now.
right. Yeah.
You know, I think I think both these teams will be. I mean, the Chiefs have won so many playoff games over the years, and the Lions are trying to get back to where they had a horror show in the NFC title game last year. I think they will be. But you're right. I mean, those are the games you look at in history, the 87 Niners Vikings game or the 96 Jags Broncos game and go, how the hell did that happen? Well, it happened. It doesn't happen a lot. Normally, those teams that are big favorites, they win. And they win. They win big. But it does happen occasionally.
You wonder if it's in the locker room there in Detroit that there was sort of like a big, whoo, we don't have to play Stafford or Bake in the
Right.
divisional round. Now we just have to take care of the commies and their rookie QB. Be careful there, too. I think that I want to bounce to some other stuff, to the have-nots out there right now. And the QB carousel, and it's already started to spin a little bit. I don't want to hold you up too long here, so let's get to some of that. Do you think Dak Prescott? I mean, it's starting to line up that Dion slash Shador, because I assume if Dion winds up in Dallas, that they're going to wind up with Shador as well. Then
They
what
hired
becomes
Deion Sanders, man. I
you
I'm
don't
sorry.
think that's the way it goes?
I mean, if they hired Dion, like it is not an anti-Dion take. It really is. But it's like, why? Like, other than Jerry just wants to have the headlines and throw him on a billboard and put him on some of the season tickets, I like Deion Sanders is the head coach of the team. I mean, look, I think it's a lot different having the whole Coach Prime
Splashy and
thing.
all that, right?
What's that?
It would, at minimum, if you buy, and I am not somebody who thinks that Jerry Jones it regards pro football as television production. I know people always say that about him.
Oh no, he
By the
wants to
way, I
win.
say I absolutely, and I don't think
Yeah,
he's been
you know.
as lousy. He doesn't spend necessarily, but it's not as though he always goes for the shiny new object as much as people accuse him of doing. And by the way, if you're a billionaire, then of course you should play with the toy and not just give it to other people to play with while you sit by and watch them play with that toy. Of course, I would be involved in that sort of thing. I don't mind that. But do you think there's any chance that Dak moves? Because then that really shakes things up.
I mean, they just signed him. I don't think they can move him. Like against a cap, it would be a train wreck. I don't think they can do it. But I just think, look, Dion, to his credit, right? He starts out at Jackson State and did a nice job there. Goes to Colorado, and Colorado was a disaster of a program, and he has at least gotten it back to respectability. I mean, it's maybe not like top 10. They're not threatening for a national title, but like nobody would expect that. So my take on Dion is not anti-Dion as a coach. Like he's done a nice job. My take on that is like I just feel like maybe there's a little bit more ripening on the vine there before you're the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And I think there's also a little bit of like look, Dion loves Dion. And that's great in college when these kids like I know there's a transfer portal now, it's different than it was 10 years ago, but like you can kind of cash in on your name a little bit. I mean, you go to the NFL and you start in with so some of these guys can be like, look, man, I don't care who you are in 1995. Like it doesn't matter to me. Like just tell me where to be. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm a grown man. Um
I agree with this 99.9% of the time. Dion, I for whatever reason, is the most revered pro football player from the 20th century now. I legitimately, include maybe Brady and maybe Peyton are up
yeah.
there, but Dion, bring up Dion to the modern player and they swoon still. It's wild. They still love Dion.
Do you think he's going to get the job in Dallas?
I think that if Jerry could reset things and move on from Dak and the weight of that deal, which as I hear you, it's hard to move. But then again, there are going to be some desperate teams out there in the AFC North and otherwise. Um, I I think it's plausible that happens. Who else at this point? I mean, do you think they're going to win Ben Johnson? I don't see that one
No.
working out for him.
No, I don't either. I mean, and to move Dak, by the way, they'd have to, I mean, look, they'd have to post June 1 it, and they'd have to eat 42 million next year and dead cap. I mean, it would be,
Okay, so that's not going to happen.
yeah, they're not going to move Dak. Look,
Okay.
I mean, look, I think the one thing that the Cowboys have going for them here is it's not a bad job. It's not. Like Jerry is more patient than people give him credit for. Like, you have time. You have, I mean, say whatever you want about Dak. He's better than a lot of these quarterbacks in the NFL. You know, like you can win with that roster. If Dak doesn't get hurt this year, maybe they're a playoff team,
The
right? So
most negative people in some cases and on some level are the people that are in the building. So when Troy Aikman says, I don't think Dallas is that juicy a job anymore, that has a cynicism to it that can only come from somebody
yeah,
who consider where Aikman is coming from. When I was there, we were
right, we
right
were
in the
done.
rain. Now they're hurting my legacy by playing like this. That's what's
Well,
in between his
and,
words there. So same thing as these people who are now ashamed of the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Some of the alumni that are saying this isn't the Steelers. Like they add an acidity to the conversation that wouldn't be there among just objective people.
right. Well, and also too, I mean, look, you got to look around, right? If you're a prospective head coach, now Dion's a little bit of a special case because I don't think anybody's tying Dion to the Jets job, okay? But like the rest of these guys, you know, the Ben Johnsons of the world, the Aaron Glens, the Matt Nagy's, you know, so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Where would you rather coach? Dallas or the Jets? Dallas or New Orleans in that cap situation? You know, I mean, Jacksonville, you could argue it in the sense, okay, hey, look, you know what? No income tax for the state. And you get Trevor Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. But like Chicago, I mean, yeah, you get Caleb Williams, but that ownership situation's a mess too. I mean, yeah, and so, yeah, there's just, you look at the jobs. Which job, other again, than maybe, I mean, the Raiders? What are you walking into? You got a division with Mahomes for the next 10 years? Good luck. Have fun. I mean, it's
And
just,
answering to Mark Davis and Tom Brady.
yeah, I don't know. And no quarterback. Like,
Yeah, right.
you're walking into a division with Mahomes, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh, and you're just like, this is great. I have Mark Davis.
I
I,
think I as much a stink as the organization has on it because of its first 20 in the millennium, which is ironic given that they won all the Super Bowls. But Mike Vrabel just took the juiciest job out there. The
yeah,
the
yep,
QB who appears to be the real deal headed into his
yep,
sophomore season with a coach friendly owner. I mean, yeah,
yep.
that seems like the right spot. No offense to Jared Mayo. Jared Mayo's treatment notwithstanding, generally a coach friendly owner, right?
Yes. I think that was the best spot because of the craft, because of Drake May, and because of all the cap space. And they have the fourth overall pick. Like, you can rebuild that thing fairly quickly. I look at the Saints job and I'm like, that might be the worst job of all of them. What are you going to do? You get this old roster, you can't move on from anybody because you're so capped out. You've restructured these contracts 5 times over. Like, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. You're basically paying for Mickey Loomis' sins for the next 3 to 5 years. There's just nowhere to go. The Raiders job is another job I look at. I just think it's a bad job. You know, the Raiders have this cachet because they've been the Raiders for so long. That's gone. Like, the team is a disaster. The Bears, really tough division. Look, you like Williams, maybe, but also like that, you know, you talk to people in the league, and a lot of people will sit there and go, yeah, but Kevin Warren's there. And he's kind of the go between the front office and the ownership group, and it's kind of a disaster of a setup. And Ryan Poles, like, he has how much time left in him here if they don't turn this thing around soon. So not a lot of great jobs. And then the Jets, I mean, that speaks for itself. So, like, not a lot of great jobs right now. If you're the Cowboys, that job is a lot more attractive. The problem is they now cannot interview anybody who's playing in the playoffs until they're out of the playoffs because they missed the window because Jerry took a week to figure I didn't want Mike McCarthy around them. Like, how does that meeting not happen the day after the season? That's the thing with Jerry that and this is a Jerry thing, right? Like, their contract extensions took forever and cost them more money. And like, those are the things that are true of Jerry, where you're just like, man, you got to be more aware of what's going on. And he's not. And
I think that's fair. Yeah.
it's not his drafting. It's not his patience. It is his inability to do things on time that kills that franchise. And this is another example of it.
All right, one of the two, you talk about, a 25-year-old and whether or not they care about the name Deion Sanders or even Dallas Cowboys, if that really matters versus Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of career opportunity and all that. I think that Dallas Cowboys still, hits differently than some other brands do. And so too does Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you think Mike Tomlin is gonna be traded? Do you think there's any chance R2 is behind the scenes looking into any of that there's any shot of that happening? And do you think it's funny because I'm so steeped in what Steelers media thinks about this. I'm not sure even exactly what the objective opinion is, what the national opinion is anymore. It seems like the last couple of weeks have finally turned some national voices around and said, like, maybe it is best for Tomlin to move on.
So, look, I wrote a column immediately after this game for Sports Illustrated, the Steelers Ravens game, and I said, look, if I'm the Steelers, I would completely rebuild this team because I just don't think they can win anything meaningful with the way this team is currently constructed. And Pickens has 1 year left on his contract. Watt has 1 year left on his contract. Watt is a great player. He's 30 years old. Pickens, you
People,
paying that
that's,
guy
I think,
100?
I have to say, I think that's where the conversation, in the first paragraph of the conversation, at least, people need to acknowledge it's not just Cam Hayward, but TJ Watt is the best days are over. They have
Yes.
already happened now. And so you need to sort of include that in your analysis. I think so. So yeah, you're exactly right. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's 30. He's got 1 year left on his deal. George Pickens is young, but has 1 year left on his deal. And my thing with George Pickens is like, are you paying that guy 100 million bucks? Because I'm not. There's no way in hell I'm giving that guy $100 million and hoping he turns around his behavior and his antics. Right? Like that's probably going to make it worse. I would trade George Pickens. I would trade TJ Watt. And I would listen on any other meaningful player on the team. Fryermuth, Hayward, Queen. I mean, you look at their cap numbers, you could trade any of them. Fitzpatrick, any of them. I would do it. But I would definitely trade Watt and Pickens. I'd get picks. I would sit down with Mike Tomlin and I'd say, look, Mike, if you want to stick around, you're 52 years old. If you want to go through the rebuild, we can go through the rebuild. But if you don't want to do that, we're going to trade you. So what do you want to do? And
Mm.
if he says, look, I don't want to be traded, I want out of my contract. Okay, yeah, I'd respect that. I would grant him that. He deserves that. Um, if he wants to go somewhere, I would trade him to that team, assuming they can work it out. But I think the biggest disaster for Pittsburgh here is going into this offseason being like, we can sign Sam Darnold. Like, no, no, no. Just look, reset it. Just reset. Like, it's okay. They have been anywhere from competitive to great my entire life. It's okay to have a couple of years you reset this thing. But I just don't like in the AFC, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. You have Mahomes, you have Allen, you have Lamar, you have Burrow. Nobody is winning in the AFC if they don't have an elite quarterback. Nobody. You're not getting to
That's
all
right.
these games. It's not happening. I mean, we don't even talk about like Stroud is assumed to lose this weekend, and he's terrific. And it's like, yeah, that's nice. They're going to get beat, right? Like it's now that's not necessarily about him, but it's Herbert. Herbert looks like a dog in the wild card weekend. And he's a top 10 quarterback in football. And in the AFC, it was like he can't even get the divisional round. The Steelers have to find their guy. And you're not going to do it
I,
picking 20th every year.
It's exactly right. And then people will push back with, well, what about the Eagles? Jalen Hurts isn't necessarily that difference maker at QB. But yes, I mean, overall roster and everything else. And by the way, that's sort of the thing that they have been building towards is that Eagles model. The offensive line probably will be a position of strength, which is why it's going to be difficult to organically wind up 3-14. They're going to have to just move, to your point, move some major assets, even if it's a name like TJ Watt,
Yeah.
and move, and first round picks and all of that. I do think the roster is semi close if they got that QB. If, as a for instance, you buy Cam Ward being worth it, I don't know if you do, but if you buy that Cam Ward is the real deal, now is the time. You can move up with the offensive line and the overall roster. Trade away some first round picks. Look at the Rams, who won a playoff game on Monday night. Remember when they went all in to win that Super Bowl
Yep.
and that was going to be it for the next decade? That was the trade-off they made with the football gods. They barely skipped a beat. They had a down year and then resurrected and overcame not just that the lack of draft picks and everything else. They lost the greatest defensive player in the history of people, and look at them now playing in the divisional round. So I'm with you. I think people have a fear of what awaits these teams that, kind of pull the band-aid off. And, the Colts tried to go through that purgatory themselves year after year with these big name free agents, Phil Rivers and otherwise. And it's just not a method to winning football. In the QB league at this point, you have to go and get the QB or you're just lost at sea. And people say, well, what would they do with that guy? Look at the Washington Commanders, everybody. No one had worse vibes than the commies did a couple of years ago. And now they're in the divisional round too. Why? Because of Dan Quinn? Maybe. But more importantly, because they got the real
Look at the
deal.
Bengals. The Bengals are the biggest joke for franchise I've ever seen. And they got Burrow, and 2 years later, they were in the Super Bowl. Okay, and they didn't even put a great roster around them. They gave them good receivers. But, I mean, that offensive line can't block anybody. Defensively, Anarumo kind of did more with that unit than he should have for years. I mean, it's not like you looked at the Bengals and said, I mean, how many Hall of Famers has Burrow played with on that team? One? I mean, Hendrickson's terrific on his going to Hall of Fame, but Jamar Chase, I mean, when you look at it, how many great players? I mean, even look, Josh Allen's been on really good teams, but again, how many Hall of Fame teammates does Josh Allen have? Zero? I mean, unless you think Stephon Diggs is going. I mean, Von Miller, but Von Miller's a Hall of Famer because of what he did before he got there. How many guys? Yes, Mahomes has had Tyreek Hill and Mahomes had Kelsey and Chris. Yes, he certainly is the coach, all of it. Most of these teams, and that's why they're a dynasty, but most of these teams, how many Hall of Fame players are surrounding that quarterback? I mean, it's not
well, as I always say, like the egalitarian thing, it's like it's a team sport. It's not just about the quarterback. They're not equal. You know how I know? Because they don't pay them anywhere close to the same. That's how I know that they're not equal. They pay the quarterback more because he's more valuable to the team. Yeah. Obviously, that's why they give the MVP to a quarterback every year, because he's more valuable. Obviously, people are overthinking this when they try to have that conversation. All right, listen, man, I don't want to hold you up too much. But I think you love talking about football as much as I do. Last thing then, let me take a guess at how you think the divisional round goes. Stafford, real good. Do you think here's a wacky conspiracy theory for you? Do you think Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford got confident enough around December-ish? They take down the Bills that they say, we're going to the playoffs now. We can hold back a little something against the Jets and otherwise in these final regular season games. Let's not show all our cards, and let's come out in the playoffs and look a little bit different, because obviously they did against a high-end defense in Minnesota when they looked, negligibly different than the Jets did, 3 weeks or so ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, with good teams, when they can do that, I think they do.
I think the Chiefs do that.
Oh, yeah, the Chiefs do that. I mean, the Chiefs will, I think, basically privately, they do that all year long. I mean, they'll hold back 20 of their best red zone plays because they just don't care. They don't need them. How
scary is that? It really is Princess Bride. Dread Pirate Roberts in the sword fight with Inigo Montoya. Like, honestly, why are you smiling? Because I am also left-handed. That thing is like, that's what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes do all season. Imagine Josh Allen like, oh, you've been holding stuff back all season and you're still the number one seed? Sheesh.
Yeah, no, that's why it's so fun. It'll be fun to watch them on Saturday, because they will absolutely roll out 20 plays you haven't seen all year long. Where they'll just do things. And a lot of times, as someone who's watched every snap of them this year, they'll do stuff where they line up in a formation where they've done the exact same thing out of it the whole year. And you're like, oh, I know what this play is. And then they'll bootleg off of it and throw a bomb down the sideline, and the guy's wide open. And you're like, well, how could you blow that coverage? It's like, well, because everyone on defense saw the formation and was like, oh, it's a run to the left. And then they boot out of it. And you're like, nope, it's not. It's 45 yards to Worthy down the sideline. Like, Yeah, no, they absolutely do it.
That's right.
I,
Setting them up, weeks in advance and all of that. I
yes.
could buy that McVay and Stafford were doing some of that. I don't think the Eagles are the team necessarily that would work against. The Eagles hammered them in their first showdown earlier this season.
They
I
did. They
predict
beat him up.
I think that happens again. I think the Rams show up probably a little bit better than they did, but I suspect the Eagles survive. I bet you're going to say the Lions survive their game. And then you have already said you think the Chiefs will survive that one, although it's not a walkover. So
No,
I think you're about to tell us that you think the Ravens are going to win this game. And it is weird that the Bills are at home and they're catching. I know it's a point and a half at the time of this recording, but still
right.
at home. Again, I am big on what happened earlier in the season. It does matter what the result was when they went head to head, and the Ravens destroyed the Bills. I know it was a long time ago in 2024, but still it
Well,
happened. Here's the difference. Zay Flowers. That's not, I mean, maybe not a factor against the Steelers with the way that defense was playing. But here, it's got to loom large. How
oh,
say
it
you?
matters. It matters. If he plays, it matters a lot. Look, I'm assuming he's going to play. Um, I'm going to take Baltimore for the reason that I just think they're better coached, and I think they have more high-end talent. And I think
Mm,
in a game like this, that might be the difference. You know, if you look at Buffalo this year, Allen has been awesome, but he's kind of canceled out by Lamar, right? So then you start looking at like, okay, well, what about the rest of these teams? The Ravens are just better. I mean, the thing that would scare me if I'm a Bills fan more than anything else, well, two things. One I mentioned earlier is they love to play nickel. And against this team, that is a death sentence. It is an absolute death sentence to sit in nickel against this team. The other thing, the Bills are 28th in the league on third down defensively. And like, if you can't get off the field against them, they will rip off 9-minute drives over and over and over. Like they will just sit in it. They don't care. Um, I just think the Ravens defense, which was terrible early, has gotten much better lately. And the Bills is kind of the opposite. They were decent early and they've been
hmm
awful. And I don't care how they played against Denver. I don't care. And if you watch that game, Denver for the first 2.5 quarters of that game had guys open. Knicks had all day and they just couldn't do anything. That won't be a problem with the Ravens. Like if Lamar's got all day to throw and he's got open receivers, he's going to hit them, and it's going to be a problem for Buffalo. I think that is easily the biggest toss-up of the weekend, but I will take Baltimore. I just think they're a better football team than Buffalo is.
And as best you can, you haven't seen the Chiefs in quite a while. Patrick Mahomes hasn't thrown a
Right.
pass since Christmas. Um, do you think that this ends with Mahomes and company in New Orleans in a few weeks?
Yes, I do. And look, I am a big, as you know, I am a big history guy. I think that
Yep.
is so hard. I mean, forget even three-peating. Like teams who have gotten the three straight Super Bowls, New England a few years back, Miami in the 70s, and of course Buffalo famously in the 90s. That's it. It's a whole list. And Buffalo didn't win any of them. I My feeling on it is I
By the
think
way, talk about QB wins and whether or not they matter. And I'm glad you said that. That is, you know, is there a better example out there besides Danny White and the
Jim Kelly.
lack of name recognition for anybody? But can you imagine that the Bills did what they did? They went to four Super Bowls and they are a footnote at best.
Right.
Nobody mentions them among the best teams of all time. Name another four Super Bowls in a row and be like, yeah, can you imagine those sad sacks? Like they
Yeah,
went to four Super Bowls
I
against
know.
Marino and
Yep.
Elway.
Yep. No,
Yeah, the poor guys.
it's true. I mean, but look, my overriding feeling on it is I know it's a playoff game and anybody can win. I got to be honest. I'm just being honest. I would be shocked if the Chiefs lost to Houston. I'd be I wouldn't be shocked if they don't cover the number. I could see it being like 27-20 or something like that. But the Chiefs in the playoffs are just they're just a different animal. And I feel like if the Texans had Dell and or Diggs, I'd be like, okay, you know what? Maybe the problem is the Chiefs are just going to put McDuffie on Collins in this game and say you're not beating us. Anybody else, go for it, and they can't. Like, there's just nobody else out there. I don't think they can. I don't think they can protect Stroud. So I think they're going to win. And then if they play Baltimore or Buffalo, I think that's their hardest game. If they get to the Super Bowl, they're winning the Super Bowl. They will win. They will. There's no team that is stopping that team 60 minutes from a three-peat. But if they, I think Buffalo or
I
Baltimore,
guess if you give them 2 weeks, Philly would be scary. Detroit, not as much, except for the fact, and however that would impact spiritually the two sides. We already know everybody who isn't rooting for their team in these playoffs is rooting for the Lions. I don't think 28-year-old multimillionaires care that much, but it would be a little bit of a plague to be the Chiefs. And I mean, it never really dented the Patriots. I wonder how, though, that
I
does
don't think they
feel
care.
to be the Chiefs if you're in the Super Bowl and everybody's like, go Lions, we hope you lose.
I mean, last year it was basically a home game for the Niners, and it didn't seem to bother them too much. I know,
I'm
I
just
mean,
looking for reasons. That's why I
no,
love
I mean,
dynasties
look,
because I
I
like to
think
watch
Philly
them
would
fall.
be, I think Philly would be the toughest matchup because I think they're probably the most well-rounded team with all the injuries to the Lions. But I think Buffalo and Baltimore, those are almost like divisional matchups at this point for Kansas City. Like they just see them every year, they know them so well. That to me is the hardest game. That would be the toughest game. If they get by that game, if they get by Lamar or Josh Allen, it's I think they're gonna win. I think that's it. Like I think now look, maybe Houston pulls off a massive upset, but let's be real. If Houston wins this game, that's one of those like all timers you remember 20 years from now, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
it would, and again, it's going to require the Chiefs playing a terrible game. If the Chiefs just play a good, solid football game by their standards, they're going to win. They may not win by 20, but they'll win. Um,
Bart Scott happens, things happen along the way, and that
yes,
that is a
it would have to be
possibility.
that. And maybe
But
it will be. Maybe it's one of those. You know what? Look, it is incredibly hard to three-peat. No one has ever done it in the Super Bowl era. You look at a team like the 99ers, you look at them and go, how the hell did they know? They lost to Jeff Hostetler. Like, it happens. Roger Craig
I think one of the
fumbles.
most significant upsets in the Super Bowl era is that one.
Yes. I
I
mean,
mean, if
it
because the
happens.
Niners then there would be forget the Patriots or the Steelers of the 70s or the
It was the
early
greatest game of
90s
all time.
Cowboys. There would be zero conversation about who the best team is of all time. It would be that
Yes.
Niners team.
Yes.
Right.
And so, I mean,
And
I
these
think,
are these are the stakes, man. This is what's great. And the only thing I resent is people who try to diminish that by saying, like, come on with the QB wins. They don't the sample size is too small.
no, listen,
The
those
stakes
people
are
are,
so monumental right now. Right. Whoever loses that game, I think is going to be 30, and they are never going to have been in a Super Bowl. But I think
yeah,
Lamar Josh Allen gets to
yeah.
30 without ever being in a Super Bowl.
No, people who say the quarterback wins don't matter don't understand what history is. They don't. Because I got to tell you, in 30 years, nobody's going to give a damn about, yeah, but that run that Allen had in week 11 was sick. Nobody's going to care. It's not going to matter.
We'll
All
enjoy the
that stuff,
highlights, but it won't mean anything
right?
to us. We'll say,
Nobody's
well,
going to
Mahomes
care.
was the
Like,
best, though. Right.
look, Philip Rivers had some great moments. And guess what? When his name comes up for the Hall of Fame, then maybe he gets in at some point, maybe he doesn't. I think he's borderline. But when you sit down in that room and have that conversation, people are going to sit there and go, okay, well, did he get to a Super Bowl? No. So he obviously also didn't win a Super Bowl. He went to one AFC title game. He lost it. And not to knock on him, he lost to an undefeated team, but they lost. Like, what are the signature moments in his career? What are they? I mean, they don't exist. Him wearing a bolo tie, who cares? That's going to be the thing that like Eli Manning was not as good of a player down to down as Philip Rivers. But when you walk in that room and you present Eli Manning's case, the first thing you're doing is slamming 2 Lombardi trophies on the table and saying he beat Tom Brady to win these. And I got to tell
Here's
you, it's compelling.
I I completely agree. And one more little piece of evidence to deepen the point that we obviously agree on is why is Patrick Mahomes just it's understood is better than Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen? Why is that to everybody? Is it the stats? Are you going to cite a number for me? I don't
Right.
think you are. The number you're going to cite for me is the number of rings on his fingers versus the zero on their
And it's that he
combined
beat
hands.
those guys to get there.
That's
I mean,
right. I mean, what else are we talking about, really?
I
But
mean,
okay.
he is in the playoffs. Look, he's split with Burrow, right? He's 1-1. They've gotten each other in the AFC title games. He's 1-0 against Lamar in the playoffs. He's also, I think, like 5-1, 6-1 all time against them. And against Allen, he's 3-0 in the playoffs. Like, when you think of Mahomes, like, okay, so look, if you were to say that right now they have to retire this second and you had to go 25 years in the future, you're going to show Lamar highlights and it's going to be unbelievable plays. And you're going to show Josh Allen highlights and they're going to be unbelievable plays. And you're going to show Mahomes highlights and you're going to be unbelievable plays in the Super Bowl. Like games that everybody remembers, him running against Philadelphia and him throwing a touchdown in overtime to beat the Niners and him throwing that jet chip wasp play to Tyreek in Super Bowl 54. Those plays matter more than a spin move in week 12. They just do. They matter. Like when you
Tom
think,
Brady throwing a swing pass repeatedly to James White isn't as spectacular cinema as some of the stuff Josh Allen does, but who cares?
right, I mean, Brady's going to sit down at the table with Josh Allen, put 7 rings on the table and go, now show me yours. I mean, it's just, Mahomes is three super, and it's about the trophy case, right? The trophy case for Mahomes, he needs like 5 of them. I mean, it's just, he's done so much. He has had so many iconic moments. And when you think about the great quarterback, whether it's Elway or Montana or Brady, you think about in the biggest moments, what did that guy do? I mean, to your guy, Bradshaw, who I think kind of gets unfairly left out at times. Like
He definitely does.
Bradshaw in the regular season, now he won the MVP in 78, but like a lot of years, in the regular season, it was fine. They were a running team a lot of his career. Go look at the tape in the Super Bowls. Go look at his throw to Lynn Swann and Larry Cole knocked him unconscious, but he stood in there and made one of the great throws of all time. Go look at Super Bowl 13 when he threw for over 300 yards, or Super Bowl 14 when they're losing to a Rams team that there's no way in hell they should lose to. And Bradshaw makes 2 of the all-time great throws to Stallworth. Like, it matters. It
I've not
matters. It
seen
doesn't
any
matter
of
that
these
Dan Fouts
plays.
had
I
better
gotta look
numbers
these
because he
up.
didn't do what Bradshaw did in those moments.
These are interesting anecdotes you're sharing. I gotta find a pencil and write these down. So Super Bowl 13, you say I should go back and watch that. I should check that one out. The Steelers do well in that. Okay,
You
I'm gonna
should
look for
check
that
that.
one. Now you are a student of history. You have another great project now available for the public to consume in Sports Illustrated. I was thrilled to once again be included in it on the panel. I'm very flattered by it as a Vane guy. Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, so I can let the cat out of the bag now because it's on newsstand. So the magazine just went up. It is with Simone Biles on the cover for Sports Person of the Year. We did a project called the 50 most memorable games of the Super Bowl era, and Shek, myself, and 35 others voted on who should be on this list. I mean, we're talking the who's who of media, and then the 2 of us. And so it was a lot of fun to put together. We took everybody's list. We ranked all the games down. We distilled it into a top 50. And then everybody on the panel gave a quote or two about the games and why they were important. And then I went out and I'm actually wrapping that up now. Went out and talked to star players and or coaches from each of these games and got a quote from each of them as to why it mattered so much, what they think about and they think of the game. So in the magazine, you'll see the top 50 rankings. It's an 18-page spread. They did a
Hmm.
beautiful job with the photography and everything else. And it's going to be, my words in there in the magazine. Then online, it's going to be in a 2-day series the week before the Super Bowl. And in that case, you will see everybody's words, my words, the panel quotes, the player quotes. We just didn't have enough room in the magazine. It would have been 100 pages. But it is something I'm super proud of. I'm glad, Shek, that you were kind enough to be part of it. It's something I assume we're probably going to do every year now because the brass loves it at SI. So, thank you for
Well,
helping.
I love thinking about that kind of stuff and throwing in my 2 cents on that sort of
Yeah,
stuff. So I
it's been a
appreciate
lot of fun.
you including me there. I appreciate you making time for us today. I told you 20 minutes. I think we did about 45, 50. I apologize. I'm sorry.
No,
You're interesting to listen to when you're
it's
talking
okay.
about pro football. So
Whenever
what
you
are we
ask me
gonna
to
do?
come on, I block off an hour because I know we're going to talk.
I
I'm,
swear, you know me better than I know myself because I swear I did tell Spaghetti it's gonna be 20 minutes. I told you 20
it's okay.
minutes, easy
I love
breezy,
talking
all that.
football.
I'm so sorry. But anyway, listen, have a great time in Arrowhead. Eat some burnt ends for me, would
I
you
will.
please? Have a great time in New Orleans when you get down there. Maybe your friend Mahomes will join you at the for a meal or two while you're down there, grilled oysters and otherwise. Thanks so much, Matt Verderame. Make sure you're tracking him down on Sports Illustrated and the Verderame Show, all the rest of it. Um, be well, Pally, and good luck to your team.
Hey, thanks a lot. Take care.